And I also created MSW Storybook add-on, which is like so that you can mock APIs in your storybook. So yeah, my talk is, if you like React, you will love Solid. So pretty bold claim. Let's see. So this is created by Ryan Carniato, who currently has been now is coming to Netlify as a principal engineer to work on Solid full time. And yeah, so with Solid, you can forget about rules of hooks. You can forget about passing dependencies manually in your effects and memos. You don't have to care that much about referential equality of objects. You don't have to worry about stale closures. You don't have to manually go and memorize expensive components. And you don't have to write these complicated selectors for getting partial state and making sure that it is referentially equal and all that. So, how is that possible? So, the key is fine grained reactivity. Now, bunch of buzzwords, what they are. So I'll just talk about pure JS for a second and tell how reactivity adds some magic to it. So here, let's say there's a variable count and it is initialized to 0. We console log it, so of course it will log 0, but then we increment count to 1 by 1. So this since JavaScript goes line by line, it logged the count and then it incremented. So there is no way to tell JS right in this file that you have to rerun the count again when the count is incremented. So but wouldn't it be nice if we could somehow tell JavaScript, hey, that this part reacts to should react when count changes. So let's augment that. Solid lets us do that using signal and effects. So now I call create signal. I pass it a 0 value, and it gives me a count and a set count. And uh, I put that console log inside a create effect expression, and then I call set count and increment it by 1. Now what will happen is that since in the create effect I have called console log count, and that's a function call, create effect now knows that whenever count changes, I have to do something. I have to run this function again. So it will first log 0 and then next time it will log 1. So this is pretty cool. But what practical purpose is there for logs? Well, if we can do any side effect, we can also update the DOM. DOM update is also a side effect. So here, let's suppose we had a heading reference. We could create a, and we wanted that whatever the count is, we want to show that count in the heading. Well, we could create an effect and pass heading dot text content equals to count. And the key here is that count, we are calling it. Count is not a value. Calling count gives the value. So when we do this, again, whenever count changes, effect will synchronize that count value to the heading text content. But writing this kind of imperative DOM update is not what we expect from a modern framework. And personally, I like JSX very much for templating, and Solid likes that too. So here's how we could do the similar like a counter in Solid. And so we have a create signal count and we have an increment function. And then there's some JSX where in a heading we can pass count. And again, notice the count is being called, not count is not a value. And then there's a button which on click we pass increment. So this is pretty standard JSX. And one thing you might worry is like JSX is like for React, how is Solid working with it? Well, JSX is just a specification. It's up to individual frameworks how they want to compile it. So React compiles it to React.create element. Solid does a little different. So this is what a simplified compiler output of Solid. I have renamed some variables to better explain things and simplified some of the abstractions. But this is essentially what is happening. So first of all, whatever the static markup was there, that has been put into this string, the template string, and this becomes our one variable. And then we clone that node, and so that gives us the DOM reference for everything. That becomes the real DOM. And now Solid notes that for the heading, it needs to update the text content when count changes. So it automatically creates the effect and puts this text content line there. And it also notes that for the button it has to bind a handle click, and since there is some delegation that it needs to do, there is some different thing going on here, and then it returns the root element. So the key thing here is that all this are real DOM operations and there is no virtual DOM happening here. this is when we call create clone node, it creates an actual DOM, and the performance bit happens because the effect is only updating the heading. It doesn't have to recreate the entire DOM tree. It knows, like it's like a surgical operation where it knows exactly what point it needs to update, and it's doing that. So we saw all this thing, but we didn't talk about components. Like we had a signal, we had effects, but nothing on components. So whereas in React, everything starts with a component. Well, the reason is that Solid is more about fine-grained reactivity and effects and all that, and component is like a syntax sugar, so that we can easily write our web apps. So and components are sort of set of functions, so that we have a dedicated way to organize our JSX and signals. So here's what it looks like. So suppose we had a function app, and we can put our count and set count there. We have our increment function, and we have our same div h1, and now instead of button we have a btn, just like in React, and we can have a button component, and it is returning JSX. Now the key thing here is that all these runs only once. So this looks like React, but it isn't. First, components only run once. So it's not like button is there, so it will rerun whenever count changes. No, nothing will rerun again. Only since the h1 has a count, so only that h1 will update. Nothing will rerun, just like a normal function. Unless we call the function again, it doesn't rerun again. It's not like internally if you're calling some set state kind of thing, then the function reruns. That is like React adds some magic to it, but that's not what you expect from regular JS. So that is there, and we have the granular effect, so instead of having an effect on the entire div and the h1 and the button, the effect is only on the h1. And similarly, suppose the h1 had a class name, so which so if you show or hide, then it needs to add a class name. So then it would have another effect which just updates the class name. So any property that you are changing, that becomes reactive, and the effect is made for that property itself. So that way it is very granular. And JSX represents real DOM nodes, and these are real, and all the click and all that are real events, just that delegated. There is it doesn't have synthetic events. So now demo time. So here's a real world app I've tried to build, and in Solid and in React both. So first, what will happen is that when I click on the Solid demo button, it will navigate me to a second route, and it fetches some data. Now, since the data loading will take time, it's better that we show the screen and show a loader here, and when the data is ready, then only transition there. And React has concurrent mode which supports this, and Solid does too. So here's it in action. I click Solid demo, it shows the loading, and then it navigates it to me. So it's for user, it's like they don't have to waste time seeing a loader. So now this page is there. If I click on the user, I see the details. I can click add friend, and I can see here, and this is synchronized. So if I click unfriend, it updates here as well. If I click just friends, it applies a filter. And notice everything is in URL, is synchronized in URL. So when I unfriend, it goes away, and I can also search. So here, if I search essay, it shows this, and there's a search history here. So this is the app. Let's see how the reason I want to show the code now, so you get a practical idea of how Solid code looks. So so this app is built with Solid and Solid App Router, and it has nested routing. So this part of the DOM is in the people shell, uh, and so we want a people list, and then we want to loop over that list and render a person avatar here. So now how do we get this people list? This is, and people shell is the component. Well, instead of writing all that logic here, like create signal, all that logic, instead of that, we can abstract it further. So we can have a create people list. Just like in hooks, we can have custom hooks, we can have this custom primitives. So here's create people list, and now it needs to get the data, and it needs to filter on those. So now to get the friends filter, whether like To get a mapping of who the friends are, we have a use friend store and we get the friends signal from that. We have a use search store to get the search query, and use people route data gives us the route data. Now notice that route data, since we are using suspense and nested routing, solid app router also gives us loader pattern, which is common in React Router 3 and Remix. So when this create people list is called, the data is already available to us. So we just call this use route data hook, and it gives us the route data. It is not like a async operation, it gives us data immediately. So now we have the data as well, and we want the search param so that we know whether just friends is on or off. So yeah, create people list. So here we have a create memo. I'll explain in a bit. What we want to do first is that we want to filter on the search. So in the fetched people list, we find the person's name and we see whether that name includes the query. If it does, we keep it in the list, and finally we are returning this list, and that becomes a search people list. Now why do we wrap it in the create memo? Well, the benefit is that search people is also like when we have to access search people, we have to call it, right? uh, because component only runs once. If I search people, if I put the filter directly here, then create people list will be called once, and whatever route data is there, it will compute it once. But when the query changes, when the route data changes, this will not rerun again. So then I could have made it into a function and then called the function in my render or some reactive context. But again, that means every time count changes, sorry, every time the route data changes, it has to call again. So better thing here is that we memorize it, and so that way, anytime search people is accessed, if the inputs have not changed, like the query is same and the route data is same, it just returns the cached value. It doesn't have to compute it again. But important thing here is we don't have to pass any dependency array. Solid is smart enough to figure out the dependencies itself. When the memo is called first time, it noticed that we are accessing the query, we are accessing the route data, and just these two. So it puts a subscription on these two, and then caches it. So this is pretty cool. Now let's apply the friends filter. So for that we have another memo. So people list, and here I am checking if the friends filter is active, and I am taking the people from the search people. Now, if filter friends is not active, I just return the people immediately. So what this means is that at this moment of time, it has only subscribed to the search params and the search people, and it has not subscribed to the status map yet. So at this moment, if status map changes even 1,000 times, Solid doesn't really care because this code never runs. Only this part of the block runs. So dependencies are conditional as well. So this happens when the filter friends become active. Then Solid runs this again, and Solid realizes that hey, I need to access they are accessing status map as well. So let me subscribe to the status map. And now when the status map updates, and status map updates when we click the friend button. So when the status map updates, this filter will run again, and we will have a new people list. And because the people list is changing, our for loop will run again, and the person avatar will re-render. And important thing again, sorry, person avatar will not re-render. Only the relevant person, only that person avatars will re-render. The rest will stay same. That bit is handled by the for component. So here the last thing I want to cover is the stores. So we had the friend store and we had the search store. So in solid.js we can it provides a store from itself, and we can have multiple stores. So it's not like Redux where we only have one store. So we can have multiple stores, and multiple components can subscribe to that at a granular level. So yeah, friend store is there. We create a store, we make some methods, and these methods can update the store using immer like pattern where the code looks mutable, but internally it gets converted into immutable code. So add friend, remove friend is there, and then we share the store using context provider, and this is the hook to access the context, use friend store, and that is what we were using here, use friend store. Similarly, you have a search store. So that concludes the demo. Hope you got a practical idea of how Solid looks. Now, uh, enough suspense. Tell us how it obliterates React, because that's how generally these introductions go. Like, this is thousand times better, and whatever you were using is not good. Well, that's the neat part. I won't. What I've done is that I've made this demo in Solid and in React. All the code is open source. All the demos are hosted. The links are active here, so you can go to these places, analyze things for yourself, and you can see the bundle size, how the code looks, how readable it is. Up to you, because what we have realized even in yesterday's talk, like what matters to Coinbase doesn't matter to Flipkart. Maybe priorities are different, so it's up to your team to decide what you like better. And you have to do the ecosystem evaluation. The libraries you care about, are they there or not? So here are the things that I really like. So one thing is one-way data flow, because this is the key thing I loved in React. That there, even when the app scales, there is a way to trace the things, how it is how the updates are happening from top to bottom, and we know it becomes scalable and maintainable. And Solid has the same concept. You can start from the app and you can break down in the trees your components, and you can trace things. The primitives are composable, so you can have a signal, and on top of that you can have an intersection observer primitive, and on top of that you can have a carousel primitive. It's up to you, and it doesn't have to be component. It can just be a wrapper on signal and effects. Up to you, just like with custom hooks. I really like that there is a immutable share store feature already provided by Solid, which is of course tree shakeable. So that way, I don't have to go to every project and figure out which update store updater they are using, like Mobex, Redux, or whatever. So that, and their one is really powerful. Like, I generally like Mobex, and their one is very similar to that. I really like that it is very modern with concurrent rendering that React is taking care of. That is there in Suspense also. Sorry, that is there in Solid also. Now, in terms of performance, uh, Solid is really great at SSR and runtime performance. The reason it is very performant in SSR is because there is no virtual DOM. So whatever template is, and it doesn't have to create effects also, right? Everything is just rendered once. So literally all the component code that you write, all the JSX you write, it becomes a string, and that is returned. So the runtime, so the SSR performance is really great. It is not like it has to first create objects and then convert that object into string. So that part is really great. And this conversion happens at compile time. So, and the runtime performance is really great because of these granular reactive primitives. uh, Also, like, there is a benchmark place where all framework authors have their benchmarks, and Solid is really at the top level of there, and all that in 7 KB gzip. And many of these Solid features are tree shakeable. So it may happen that your bundle size from the vendor bundle, it is not even 7 KB. Of course, when you add router and all that, it will increase. And here are all the other things that Solid provides. Some are from their ecosystem, like nested routing. So if you're interested in Solid, you want an intro video, here are three options based on how much interested you are and want to spend time on. So one is a 100-second video, the second is a 10-minute video from their channel, and third is a recent video by Ryan Caniato, the author of Solid, which is an hour of it. It's still an introduction video, but it's like he nails down all his mental model and how he arrived at this. So yeah, that's my talk.